to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha, homage to the unsurpassed Buddha, homage to the immaculate Dharma, homage to the harmonious Sangha, homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha. We're entering into a time which is always a bit of a, not exactly conflict, but a little bit complex, where the pattern within our cultural life after Thanksgiving and then moving into the end of the year tends to be people getting sleepy. We're kind of, laying down. And that coincides with the time within our tradition, which is in some ways the most important and the most vital, and that is the celebration of the awakening of Shakyamuni Buddha, which we will commemorate with Rohatsu Sesshin starting on Sunday. And the reason I bring that up is every year around this time, there's always a little bit of a lull in energy. There's a little bit of a lull in the questioning of what is on the path. People feeling a little, maybe run down. But it's so important to keep the vitality of practice alive. And that vitality is kept alive through our inquiry. That is the way in which the vitality is cultivated, is nurtured, and whether we're sleepy, whether we feel like, we need a little more warmth or whatever, that's not the point so much. The point is, are we keeping the questions alive? Are we keeping our own path of inquiry alive? If we're doing that, then the vitality is there. If we're not doing that, even if we're outwardly practicing very hard, sitting a whole bunch of meditation, getting up early in the morning, chanting a lot of sutras, beating the drum this way or that way, without the inquiry, the true vitality does not really emerge or sustain us. And so tonight we have another opportunity to delve into some of that inquiry, some of those questions. And so I just encourage you to ask questions without too much reserve. Don't filter too much or worry about whether it's a good question or a bad question or an okay question to ask or not to ask. That's my job. If I don't want to answer the question, I'll just say, go think about it some more or something. It's not a problem. It's better to really feel for your true and sincere questions and to allow them to live. So, with that said, what have people been encountering, or what's the fire that's there?
Ejo.
Hi.
What would you point to if you feel that the inquiry isn't there? if somebody feels like they don't have a direction, what advice would you give?
I would say to question that. You know, the inquiry isn't just something that happens to us, although sometimes it does. Sometimes we come across something and say, oh, what is this? Right? So that's one way it happens. But inquiry is also to face whatever is present with a questioning mind. And that takes our own involvement, our own practice. So when we reach the place where we say, well, I don't even feel like I have a question, then we can ask ourselves, what is that? And it's very directly, very simply. And we can start asking the question of that no question, the place of not feeling like we have anything, and see what is present. How about you? Do you have are you chewing on anything?
That I chew on.
All right.
Yeah, I think the gravity of the sleepiness is quite tempting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That darkness.
Yeah. And even that sleepiness can be our inquiry. I was just listening to someone on the radio today while I was out, and I was driving my car, and it sounds like a very interesting book. It's called Wintering, and a woman, a British woman, talking about the importance of winter. And she was making this point that in our more natural sleep cycles, it was probably the case that we would go to bed earlier because we didn't have all of these, and we would wake up in the middle of the night for a couple hours, and then we would return to sleep. And that those hours were very important, but we have done our best to exercise, to get out the darkness. We get it out all the time. And so sleep becomes this great conflict for us, because it's something which we both desire deeply and we're resisting the darkness. So that sleepiness itself, the kind of thing that seems like it's not vital, it seems like maybe it's the absence of a question, we can accept and enter it deeply so that the question can emerge, rather than resisting the like muddledness or the feeling like, I don't have a question and I wish I could take a nap. We can enter into that, and then that couple hours in the middle of the night where wakefulness returns, but it returns in the darkness as opposed into the bright light, it can emerge. So it resonated so much with what she said. It resonated so much with me because I know it as a spiritual practice. I'm kind of a hard sleeper. I don't usually get up in the middle of the night and stay awake for very long. But when I do wake up for those moments, they're so important. And exactly the same thing happens in our spiritual inquiry. So appreciate that.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
How does one reconcile Anatman and reincarnation?
So Anatman is a teaching of no self, and reincarnation is a teaching about the continuity of life. And we can make a distinction between the teaching of rebirth and the teaching of reincarnation. One thing that happened as these teachings entered into the West in general, all kinds of spiritual teachings that looked like they were the same thing, they entered at the same time, and they became conflated in our vocabulary and in our ways of understanding. So so that's the case with the teaching of reincarnation and the teaching of rebirth. Reincarnation is a teaching that each of us has an Atman, or a self, a soul sometimes is translated, and that at death, that unit, that Atman or that soul, leaves our body and travels and then enters into another body, lives a life there, and when that body passes away, then it leaves and it enters into another body. The emphasis is that the material is secondary and that this spiritual self is primary. That's a teaching of reincarnation. The Buddhist teaching of rebirth sounds like almost the same thing, but is actually very different. The teaching of rebirth says that our being is a being of karma. It's like a flowing stream. And that flowing stream is made up of elements that are both physical, but also spiritual, mental, etc. And so at the dissolution of this body, it's not that there is some core of my being, which is a self that leaves the body and goes to another body, but that the continuity of the karmic flow continues. And that karmic flow finds itself in another, expressing itself through another being. It's not that I am reborn, it's that what I call I is the rebirth of this karma, which happens over lifetimes, including in this lifetime. Like you can say, when I was 10 years old, or I was 20 years old, or 50 years old, that there's this same me which keeps replicating itself. It's like a rebirth, but that rebirth is just the continuity of the karma. There is no I there that is permanent or fixed. This is very tricky because we are so stuck of thinking of there's a me, right? Or there's a not me. But the teaching of no self is telling us there is a provisional me, which is not so easy for us to accept. That I could be a me, but the me is simply a provisional me, and that there will be other expressions of the same karma that won't be me. They will simply be expressions of that karma. That's a very theoretical answer.
How is it that the breath and the consciousness, I've noticed when I'm able to change my way of breathing, it changes my thought patterns and just the quality of my consciousness. How are those connected? How do they influence each other?
Yeah. So in the roots of our language, or English, it's very interesting to think about the word. To breathe is to aspirate, which comes back to the word spirit. So to aspirate, the spirit and aspiration. That spirit and breath are one. That they are that they're indivisible. And so I guess the why in that to me is not I don't know. I don't know why. I just know it to be so. And so what we can do is we can investigate what is the quality of that inseparability of spirit and breath, or of consciousness and breath. One of the places that could point you to investigate is we can practice on one side where we're doing something with the breath. So for example, when we feel like we're maybe anxious, too anxious, we can focus on the out breath. Right? We don't want to push it too much, otherwise we don't really relinquish. We just kind of run this engine and it doesn't really work. So we focus on the centering and the relaxing that happens on the out breath. So we very purposely employ the out breath as a way to shift our mental state, like in this case when there's anxiousness. So that's one way to study, like taking up a certain style of breathing for the purposes of affecting a result. But there's another way we can study, which is a good complement to this first kind of study, and that is where we investigate the connection between intention and breathing. So breathing is one of the very few things that we have, or maybe the only thing we have, that both is part of our conscious, we could control it, but it also happens when we're not even thinking about it. Right? It has both of those qualities. And so it is a gateway to our intention. What is the quality of our intention? Our intention to let something be, or intention to do something with what is there. The breath can react to both of those qualities. So this other kind of investigation you can do is once you feel a certain measure of settledness, so maybe you employ the first type of breathing technique, like I'm saying here, a good one is paying attention to the out breath and emphasizing it a little bit, not forcing it, but emphasizing it a little bit till you feel some measure of stability or calmness and centeredness. Then purposely pull back any control of your breath. You can in fact just say, I'm not going to breathe. It's not stopping your breathing. Don't stop your breathing. That's, again, the intention to do something with your breath, right? You're stopping it. So it's not stopping breathing. It is just not controlling the breath at all. Letting the breath come in and out, but remove your control of it, but keep your awareness there. You'll find something very interesting. Your breath will change like that. And for most people, it won't know what to do. It will get a little like nervous and kind of, but stay with it and just really pay attention to the breath coming in and out without any type of control. If it starts to bring up a lot of anxiety or you're feeling a little, then go back to the first way of breathing, paying attention to the breath, enjoying the breath, savoring that quality of being able to breathe out and the relinquishment that comes with it, right? And then you can go back to this other way and see what happens. That's a place where we can investigate the connection between consciousness and intention and breath in this very kind of direct way. And then through those two types of investigation, there is a middle place that can emerge in which the harmonizing of breath is neither a control nor is it just not doing anything. That there's a place where those two things come together, and but you have to kind of investigate it through both sides.
Ejo,
Mm-hmm.
in the Teisho, you said thinking, not thinking is the note of prajna. I think you said that. Can you?
That sounds pretty good.
Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. So the thinking, not thinking comes from a famous koan, which Dogen Zenji takes up in his teaching of Zazen. And the without going through the whole koan, the basic instruction is thinking, not thinking, non-thinking. And there is a whole avenue of investigation of those three terms, which is very alive within our tradition. Now, a lot of people interpret this instruction as don't think. They think like, oh, I'm sitting meditation. My job is to clear my mind, right? We hear that all the time. And so we think to clear the mind would be to stop the thinking, to not think. But this instruction is different. This instruction says to think, not thinking, right? So thinking has to be completely employed. Right? There has to be a full application of our mind to the practice. So we should be thinking. We should have the courage to think. That doesn't mean we sit down and we just ruminate over all the stuff that's spinning around in our head, right? But it means that the full employment of our mental faculty is present. One of the ways that we do that within Zazen is paying attention to the posture of Zazen. And so the body, filling our whole body with mind, with our thinking, our feeling. And the same thing with the breath. We put the full attention there. And then any thought that arises, we don't resist it at all, right? We don't resist the thought at all, not even slightly. It takes great practice to be able to do that. Right? It's just kind of effort to allow the thought. In our total allowance of the thought, the thinking can become not thinking. Or the thinking in its wholeness, it doesn't need to go anywhere. It doesn't need to replicate itself in the next moment. It doesn't need to make something of the world. And in that full expression of the thinking, there's not thinking. So this is what the Prajnaparamita teachings are teaching us when they say no. The Heart Sutra. It's saying, don't make anything of it. Don't make anything of the eye. Don't make anything of the ear. Don't make anything of the nose. Don't make anything of the tongue. Don't make anything of the mind. Which just means eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. Just as they are. But if we start with just as they are, we go, oh, my body. Oh, what about this part of my body and that part of my body? And we think about it and we ruminate over it and we do all these things. So we fill it completely with our consciousness, with our awareness. And then it can just be. And that's a no. That's a kind of way of understanding no. And it's really wonderful because no is not a denial. No is as a powerful affirmation. It's a powerful affirmation of the total simplicity of being. And that simplicity of being is our interdependence. You know, each thing just as it is relying on everything else just as it is, in a very simple, straightforward way. So this teaching is a kind of like a gateway to that practice and that reality.
So it sounds like what's kind of helpful is to put your mind into the awareness of your body rather than your mind doing its mind thing.
Yeah.
Like if you just let it, you start with the awareness, the awareness in your body, then it helps to approach the not thinking state or something.
Yeah. So you put your mind into the body and fill it totally. So there's one way we could we start out putting our mind into our body, and I've been having a little bit of stomach gurgles the past couple of days, and so I could sit and I could just be feeling about that and kind of ruminating about it and kind of fretting over it, and even without a lot of cognitive things happening, I'm just kind of there in the energy of that, right? So what I want to do is, that's true, I'm having a little gut problem. This is true. This is happening to me right now, so I'm saying little gut problem. So I could just stay there, right? But what I'm suggesting is don't feel it, allow it, and don't resist it. Don't try to pretend like it's not there. So there's that part of my awareness, but then allow my mind to enter into my whole body, right? Not just that one place which catches my attention, but allow the mind to enter into the fullness of the body, all of those places that I am not aware of because this place is talking to me a little bit, you know? So I let that awareness expand and to completely fill. And then there's the same thing with the breath. So in the breath, the awareness is not just, okay, I'm going to take this vast thing and I'm going to point it at my breath. Right? Like awareness is vast and I'm going to point it at this small thing, breath. It's more that my awareness, this me, is present with the breath. Right? The breath is moving in and out through the whole world. Everything is breathing in and out. And so my awareness of the breath, at first, like I might notice my gut, here I might notice my breath as a thing that's coming in and out of me. And then I can open and feel, oh, the breath actually is me. The coming in and out of it is me. Then the same thing happens with the mind. So we may have some little thought, or we may have something we're concerned about that kind of going over. Maybe something happened today that's staying with us and it's churning, or something we're looking forward to tomorrow or dreading tomorrow, and that's moving around. And so we feel those things, we allow those things, but then we allow a fullness to emerge. Suzuki Roshi, the founder of San Francisco Zen Center, would say, give your cow a maximum size field as possible. One way to control the cow is to put a fence around it. The other way to control the cow is to take away all the fences. And then the cow has no border from which to relate to, has no boundary from which to relate to. So first we give it kind of this smaller thing, and then we look at what's going on there, and then we take it off. We take off those edges and release totally. This is also related to the teaching of form and emptiness. So when we say there's form is emptiness, emptiness is form, that it's impossible for us to really understand that in a rational way. But in the same way that a thought and a not thought can be one thing, this is the same kind of thing as a form and the emptiness being inseparable. For there to be a thought, it takes not thought. And for there to be not thought, it takes thought. And they relate in this way, but normally we're just taking one side or the other. And so it seems impossible that they could be together. That part might be too confusing or not so helpful, but
well, that's a tree is not a tree, therefore it's a tree.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
You?
Mm-hmm.
Again, from New Show, you talked about grasping and aversion versus grabbing and letting go. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering if you could describe the difference of those two.
I don't remember what my point was.
Well, they seem similar in my mind. In one, you said to avoid grasping and avoid aversion. Mm-hmm. And then as you were also describing how grabbing and letting go is something that you shouldn't engage in. And the two seem similar in their description, and it kind of was confusing to me. So I was wondering if you could...
Yeah. Well, I don't remember what I was getting at in that point exactly, but I have a general sense of a way that I might use those words differently, and to warn against one and to talk about the other as being helpful or inevitable. And that would be grabbing and letting go is the tool of our being. So if you think about your hand, being able to grab and being able to let go is what makes your hand useful. If you only had one side or the other, your hand wouldn't be very useful. If all you could do is grab, then you grab something, you're done, right? If all you could do is let go, you could let go of something that you have in your hand, but then the hand's not useful to grab anything else. So the hand is a simple way we can understand that, but that's true of our whole being. That there's a constant activity of grabbing and letting go, particularly of our mind. So we can encounter a phenomena that's a kind of grabbing, right? We see something, we encounter something, it becomes a phenomenon to us, and then we also let go. Right? But with grasping, what we do is we clutch onto it, we don't let it go. We just hold it and we replicate it again and again and again and again and again and again and again. And our mind is wonderfully complex. With our hands, we only have two. So we grab something with this one, right? And then we grab something with this one. If we want to do anything else, we know we have to let go. But our mind has billions and billions of hands. And so we can just keep grabbing and 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 not letting go. So that's a quality of grasping. And then our life is built on, we've grasped these things here, and so we start building our life based on what we've grasped onto. And diversion is really just grasping. It's just where we grasped it, and then we holding it over here rather than grabbing and pulling it close. So we say grasping and averting or aversion, but really they're the same thing. Greed and hate really are the same thing. They're just a different expression, or we're just focusing on a different side of the same thing. So what happens with if we say greed and hate, or grasping and pushing away, is they're both emerged from ignorance. They both emerge from the delusion that there is a subject and there are objects, and that my job as a subject is to pull some things close and keep the other things far away. But now I'm stuck. Once I do that, I can't move. And I become very anxious because I know my project is not going to be successful long term. It's not even really successful right in the moment that I'm doing it. And but this is just the opposite of grabbing and letting go. Grabbing and letting go, they complement each other. So this is a very idealized way of talking about it, meaning we're kind of making the good and the bad, and you now could grasp onto the good and push away on the bad. So I don't want to lead you down that too far, but it can be helpful to think about, I do need the faculty of my being. I need to be able to pick things up, care for them, and also set them down when the time comes. That's very important. It's not that we should just be like, whatever, I don't care. We should care, but just not trap ourselves in the stasis of delusion, trying to protect ourselves by pushing and pulling.
Yes, thank you. I think telling me that the aversion and grasping are essentially the same, it's cleared up a whole lot for me.
Yeah.
Ejo,
Hi.
can you say more about relinquishment?
Yeah, relinquishment is this is a core teaching of the Buddha Dharma, and it's so misunderstood because we are in our delusion feeling like the two options are either get it or lose it, right? And so when we talk about relinquishment, what we hear is lose it. Like when I relinquish it, it's going to just go away. But that's not the purpose of relinquishment. The purpose of relinquishment is not to make something go away. The purpose of relinquishment is to change our relationship with phenomena. So when we relinquish, we don't ask something to stay or go. We allow it. And the relinquishment is not, following on the previous question, it's the relinquishment of this. It's the relinquishment of holding it at arm's length or drawing it in, which is exactly the place where something can be held. And because all things are impermanent, and because all things are beyond our grasp, the holding it will not be something in which there's just a permanent holding that looks the same way all the way through. So in that relinquishment, we also do experience things disappearing. But they disappear, their disappearing is only that the form in which we were holding them changes. They're, nothing in essentially comes and goes. So that practice is immensely freeing, not because we lose everything in the sense that it all goes away. It's incredibly freeing because we lose a relationship that's built on anxiousness. It's built on dukkha, about fretting about what our relationship's going to be. Even if it's good, we worry about what's it going to be as it keeps going. I would say furthermore, relinquishment is profoundly centering. So part of what happens from this process of a constant pushing and grasping is that we lose our own center, because we're kind of doing this, and we don't know that there is a Buddha that sits right here. And so as we relinquish, we can feel this right directly in meditation. If we're working with thoughts, for example, don't shoo your thoughts away. Open the hand of that thought. And as you do that, the thought tells you that you're here. It helps you feel your center. But it takes that relinquishment of the thought, not the pushing away of the thought, but the relinquishment of the thought, to stop being over here looking for yourself, bent over in this thought. You're coming back to here, and then you know something in a different way. So it's it's constant and profound and really enlivening. Yeah.
Are the words letting go a description of that, or is that different?
Yeah, it's the same. The thing with letting go is that we usually think letting go means going. I mean, we don't have to think of it that way. Yeah, exactly. We don't have to, but that's oftentimes we think. So like, for example, people will say, well, just let it go. Like you have some feeling that is difficult, for example, and people say, well, just let it go. As if letting go means it's going to go away.
Right.
But really profoundly difficult things, if you actually let go of them, they probably will fill you.
Right.
And in filling you, there is a possibility of transformation. But we're so subtly tilted towards, I've relinquished you now, why haven't you gone? Right. But the deeper relinquishment also it takes a real courage, because then you'll be filled with things that you've been purposely keeping at bay. The things that you hold close, they may sneak away, but the things you've been holding at bay, as you relinquish, they may rush right in. But that's also how you center. So this isn't to say we shouldn't have any boundaries within our own mind. There may be places that you need protection from, right? And so in that case, the relinquishment is a relinquishment of this idea of no boundary, which is one of the pernicious things that came out of the counterculture of the 60s and 70s, that we think that any boundary is somehow like a failure, right? And so in that outwardly we've embraced that in many ways, but inwardly we have. So in our mind there are places where there is a barrier for very good reason. So the relinquishment is not get out of here barrier, get out of here barrier. It actually allows us to understand more deeply what that boundary is about, rather than thinking that it has to go away. Just like our body, if we let go of the boundaries of our body, we'd be dead, right? We'd just be like oozing out all over the place. So we need that, and our spiritual constitution also has that. We have a body, we have a spiritual body which has those kind of boundaries. So relinquishment is a very it is the way to investigate that, but we just have to make sure to not insist on things disappearing. Yeah. It's like a garden. It's like your beautiful garden. Yeah.
It also feels like, and I guess maybe you just said this too, though, it's, I don't know, recognizing impermanence. I mean, that rather than, I can't lose this, or I can't lose you, or, I don't know. It's kind of a dichotomy though, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, see, this I would say is the whole thing. This is maybe our central trap, is that everything is expressed, when it's expressed in phenomena, it always has two sides. But for us, we say, it has two sides. Which one is true? It has to be this one, or it has to be this one. But in actuality, the two sides which are irreconcilable in our just rational way of thinking, they're totally connected to each other. So if we look at any dichotomy like that, then actually what we find is these are just two sides of the same thing. For the miracle of phenomena to emerge, I mean, certainly it's more complicated than our ability to think it through. and so we have this other capacity, and the capacity is to hold the contradiction. And as we stay present with the contradiction, we start seeing how, this isn't a dichotomy in the sense of it's either this one or this one. We start seeing how these two sides rely on each other. And in their relying on each other, we realize that they are deeply connected, or we could say they're the face of the same thing. Yeah, like form and emptiness. And then from there, a life is possible, a different kind of life than choosing this one or choosing this one. But to learn that, we have to, if we just take the very straightforward and profound fact of our birth and death, it takes us totally investing in each other to love so deeply that at someone's passing, you're completely demolished. It's not that we want to escape that reality. We want to embrace that reality completely. And when we can love and care for something and want it to be there forever so completely that its passing we're totally and completely crushed, that is a place of liberation. We don't need to defend ourselves from that. Actually, we need to learn to be that wholly and completely. And everyone's constitution for that is different. I'm a very melodramatic type person, so that's crying and wailing and rolling around and smiling and laughing. For other people, it's cooler because their emotional constitution is cooler. So this isn't about overly emotional, emotionality or lack of emotionality. It is the very fact of our investment in life.
Hey, Joe?
Hi.
Following that, so let's say I have a memory comes up, and it's something really good, like some moment, maybe with some of my family, around a campfire, say, feeling in that moment, this is as good as it gets, and saying that.
Yeah.
So whatever these memories. And realizing now in this moment, at these moments, experience
Mm-hmm.
impermanent is happening now.
Yeah.
And could I please just get what I now know about that other? Could I please remember right now
Mm-hmm.
that to have that same valuing of each moment?
Right.
And I make that pledge, I make that intention, but of course,
Mm-hmm.
I get caught up in this other stream.
Yeah.
And am not as present as I think I could be.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm thinking, I don't even know if that's possible to be that intent in a constant experience.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I would say this, that our attention is called to it when it is, when it feels like perfect. You know, it doesn't get any better than this,
Right.
right? But, you know, when your stomach's gurgling and your back hurts and it's like, oh, you got to go do this thing. Meh. Actually, can we face that in the same way that we face the perfection of the moment, where all the elements of our life come together in a way where we know something about the perfection of things? So to me, I think this is really the challenge, that when we come into the more ordinary, the more humdrum, or the more difficult, we disperse our thinking into all of these different places. Okay. Yeah. And so I think, you know, one of the medicines for this is to find the ways to cultivate that, to find the places where things, the perfection of things is more apparent, and to actively pursue them. This is building the capacity in our consciousness to recognize the simple perfection of things. And so people do this very naturally. And I think in our Sangha and in Eugene in general, like, many people are pretty good at this compared to many places, but we can always be better. It's things like, do you look to the sky to see where the moon is? Do you cultivate that habit?
No.
You know? Do you know, you could ask yourself, like, do you know what phase the moon is in right now? You know, do you know how big it is? Do you know where it's rising? Do you know where it's setting? You know, do you know what quality of the sky is in the morning, or whatever time? Maybe you get up late. You don't know what the morning is. So do you know when it's going down? Have you noticed what birds come to your yard? What kind of bugs are crawling in the ground? All of these are places. I'm referencing nature because that's a place where I really find it very easily. But do we find those very simple and straightforward moments of wholeness and completeness? This really helps us, that then when we're in a place which feels more harder to keep our attention aware of the situation just being present, we can shift a bit. We can say, oh, how is this like that funny bug I saw yesterday? How is this like standing by the river and watching it go by? Or how is this like the laugh of the child on the swing set outside? And we can call ourselves into that moment in a different way. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Joe?
Hi.
Hi. I have a question about intention, and I just realized that I think I've been trying to attain this no self, which is funny that I would try to attain no self, but I realize I've been doing that in my meditation, and then in today's meditation, it just felt like I strongly needed to say, like, yes, and to fully inhabit and fully be here, and almost even in this forward type motion.
Yeah.
And I was really surprised by that.
Yeah.
Because I thought, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be doing this no self thing.
Yeah.
And so then I thought, well, if there's a request or a call or something to fully inhabit, well, then who's doing that?
Yeah.
If there's no intention and if there's no self, and it was kind of just confusing to me. And on one hand, I know I don't need to understand it in my mind. I keep sitting. But anyway, I thought I would just bring forth this question.
Yeah. So this is what you're saying is really important. That total yes and the total relinquishment are the same thing. And I don't want to diverge in this too far. I'll come back to your central question, but I want to mark that the teaching of no self is such important medicine, and it also can be received as a poison so easily. We understand it to mean if I could just disappear, everything would be okay. We can also understand it as if I could just put aside my needs then and serve others, that would be the best thing to do because I put aside all my self-concern for others. Let's say particularly that has a particular toxicity for gender power imbalances. And we all know which way the power imbalance goes on that, right? So women are conditioned socially to think if I could just remove my own self position and care for, put my own concerns aside, that would take us to the best possible place, or that's what I'm supposed to do. And so I'm just putting a pin in that because why the teaching of no self is so important. There's all these ways in which it can fire into unhelpful, negative, and really, oppressive type power structures. To get really precise about the teaching of no self, the Buddha didn't say you should try to become a no self. The Buddha said there is no permanent abiding self. There is no self that can be gotten hold of. Or you are a no self already. Your self is a no self. It's not that there is no experience of self. It's just that the experience of self doesn't have a little person inside, which is the really, really true you that doesn't come or go. There isn't that. That's what the teaching of no self is. So Atman, that teaching of Atman would be kind of the idea like there's the little permanent you, right? And no self is Anatman, which means an means no. So the teaching of no Atman, there isn't any little permanently abiding self. So this opens up into an interesting question. If there's a radical affirmation that's coming out of me, well, who's doing that? Well, the teaching here is it's not that there is a who doing it. There's just the doing of it. And the doing of it is you. There doesn't have to be a you that's doing it, right? There doesn't have to be the little guy in there with the levers or something, doing this, and then you're experiencing it. That actually the doing of it and your experience of selfhood are one thing. That's actually what no self means. No self means there's not a separate self that then does things. It's that the doing and the self are one thing. So in our meditation, especially as we're relinquishing, letting thoughts go, different kinds of awarenesses are coming up, especially if we've been focusing on kind of like deconstructing ourselves. At some point there will be this part, just like you say, when it comes in a positive way, it's like you said, it will say yes. So really feel that yes. And feel it through your whole being, because the vibrancy of no self is so beautiful. It's why we're all here, is because we don't have permanently abiding selves. It's the reason we can talk with each other. It's the reason we can share the earth with a squirrel and a beautiful flower and and the celestial bodies. Those are all possible because we don't have some isolated self. We have a self. Our experience of self is completely intertwined with all these other things. So the yes is a affirmation of that, that all these beings come and move through me. It's not that I'm going out and just encountering them. It's that they are also moving through me. So that shift, pay attention to it. You had the experience. Now I'm going on and on about it. Pay attention to it, and then find out what is that. What is the? You can't just make it happen. You can't say, "Oh, I'm going to yes right now." Then it's you doing a yes, and that's okay. That could be helpful sometimes when you're feeling a little down. But it's different than the part where the yes emerges as you.
Right. Yeah. I think it's just that place where it's not me going yes, and yet there is a something about that.
Yeah.
There's something about a request for that for me. I can't say it in any other words, but yeah.
Great. Wonderful.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Ejo?
Hi.
Could you explain like the purpose of this mudra?
Yeah.
Like why does the Zen school use it, and just maybe the symbolism?
Yeah. So this is referred to as the Hokkai Join is what it's called in Japanese, as usually referred to as the cosmic mudra, and Hokkai means like the Dharma Dhatu or the Dharma realm, which is, I think that's why they translate as cosmic, because cosmos is maybe the word that people sometimes use for the biggest possible word for everythingness that we have. Like maybe there's a universe and then a cosmos. Is that right? Like universe is smaller than a cosmos, maybe? I'm not sure. Anyway, that's what it means in Buddhism anyway, the Hokkai. It means like the everything of everythingness. Like the Dharma Dhatu is the all worlds of phenomena. So so this cosmic mudra is the mudra of that. It's a mudra of the total wholeness of all things. And one thing that's interesting in the symbolism of it, if you look very closely at the iconography, you'll notice that a Buddha's hands, the right hand is on top of the left hand, and then the thumbs touch. But for us, we put the left hand on top of the right hand, and then we touch the thumbs together here. The reason for that is that the left hand symbolizes wisdom, and the right hand symbolizes action. And so in the case of the Buddha, their action is arising from their wisdom. So the wisdom's on the bottom and the action's on the top. But in our case, our action needs the influence of wisdom to make it wholesome, or to make it head towards the direction of awakening. So the left hand goes on top of the right hand. So the wisdom is controlling the action, as opposed to the action just emerging naturally from the wisdom. So anyway, that's kind of a side note, but that's something you can key into if you're paying attention to the iconography that you see, like pictures of Buddha or statues of Buddha. It's also important for us to realize that the mudra doesn't exist just here in the hands. So this mudra that's here in the hands is also here in the arms. So this circle that we make here. By the way, when you do this, to keep your thumbs up and really alive is the point. You just barely touch the thumb tips. Sometimes people sit like this, and if your body is shaped like that, and that's really, the other way is just very uncomfortable, that's fine, you can do it like this. But if not, it's better to put the tips of the thumbs together, like this, rather than like that. And you can feel it's like when I was a kid, if you went to the science museum, they had a static electricity machine. It has a big belt that goes zzz, and that has a silver colored ball on it. And then if you get close to it, it goes and it will shoot a little spark. Did you ever experience that? If you grab onto it and your hair will stand up or something. So that's the idea here with the thumbs, is you're getting close to that static electricity machine. It's like there's energy that's there between the two of them, and you don't want to press it together or else you lose the energy. Now it just becomes a sensation of touch, right? You want it to be just like barely touching or just not quite touching. You couldn't say which one it is. And that's where the vibrancy of the mudra emerges from that place. The circle is neither open nor closed, right? So as we make this mudra here, this mudra comes alive, which is this part of our body. And then this part, which is our whole body, the feeling of the wholeness of the whole body. And then the mudra of the room, the mudra of the whole area around us and of the earth, and so on, out through the cosmos. And then the other direction, as we make this, there is a circle right here inside, which is like a point. And there's one inside that, and inside of that, and inside of that, inside of that, inside of that, which is right here in our hara. And it's just, there's always a smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller circle. So it's like a fractal. Like, that, the fractal imagery. Do you know that, Togen, the fractals?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's like a fractal, the mudra. So what we're doing with our hand here is not just something that's done with the hands. It's done on all of those levels. And as we make the mudra, that's happening on all of those different levels. So we can bring the kind of aliveness to the mudra of that by regarding it in that way, as if it's a sacred gesture, as a sacred shape that we can embody. The other thing I would say about that is, as we explore to use to enact the mudra, it will also align all this other stuff. So like, to make this mudra really beautifully, it's going to tell all of these sinews and all this stuff in your shoulders and in your hands. It's going to teach them. And sometimes it teaches them through pain, and sometimes teaches through like openness and wonderfulness, but it will teach you. And so to not keep this too stiff, if you're just kind of holding it like that, the mudra doesn't really emerge. So if you feel lots of tension in your shoulders and everything from holding the mudra, just put your hands on your knees for a while, and then come back here. Challenge yourself, be challenged by it, but don't just lock down in the shape. And then the mudra can emerge, and then all of this starts to open up. And then the same thing with your body. It teaches the whole body about uprightness and roundness and relinquishment. And then the mind also takes that shape, and the world takes that shape. I don't know the origin of where that got introduced exactly. And in a Rinzai school, it's much more common for people to sit like this than to sit like this. I think they sit both ways, but this one is also very common. They tuck their hands in like this. And this is, I think, related to our way of doing shashu, which is also a mudra. This is the mudra of no self. So I think that's what they're doing, not positive though.
All right, thank you.
Welcome.
Ejo.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about, in this term, about Avalokiteshvara and Prajnaparamita, and we're about to sit Rohatsu, which would usually happen in the monks' hall, around Manjushri, sitting atop the mad dog. In terms of what are they up to?
Who?
The being that is Manjushri on a dog.
Oh, yeah.
One says, what is Manjushri doing? But, he's never quite alone in one sense.
Right, yeah. So Manjushri is in the monk's hall, which is the form that we have in our hall, is the sacred, referred to as the sacred monk, and is the bodhisattva of wisdom that is connected to meditation. So is there in the monk's hall as the central enshrined being of the meditation that's enacted there. When I say meditation, I don't mean only zazen. I mean all of the activities that would happen in the monk's hall. And that means, traditionally if you were in Sesshin or you were in Ango, monks would be in the hall almost all the time, eating, sleeping, meditating, studying maybe. So all those activities were happening. So when I say meditation, all of those are included. And so the form of Manjushri in this case, in much of the iconography that we would see of Manjushri, it would be usually has a crown and a lot of adornment, and like many bodhisattvas do. But the Manjushri traditionally that's in a Soto monk's hall just looks like a monk, right? So those very simple activities of meditating, eating, sleeping, studying, which is just the very simple core practice of the monk's hall, that Manjushri is taking that form and showing the wisdom of the activity. The symbolism or the actuality of Manjushri being on this lion is that all of those activities are the total vibrance of the Buddha's awakening. And so in some places, at the monasteries where you studied, I'm quite sure that both of the masters didn't want there to be a lion underneath the Manjushri. Because their master, Narasaki Iko Roshi, said you shouldn't have the lion. Just the zazen is enough. The monk should just be sitting zazen. We don't need anything extra to talk about some separate spirit. So I understand that, but I prefer the lion because we so quickly take the form of zazen as being something we think we know what it is. And that then can devolve very easily into a simple procedure of emulation, just emulating the form which we have accepted as being the inevitable shape. And so the lion reminds us that if our imagination shuts down, then we have lost the vital energy of the spiritual enactment that's taking place. We're reducing things to the world of a physical form. Not that the physical form isn't important, it's vitally important, and it's not separate in any way from the image or from the imagination from which it springs. So this is the reason that the steeds are so important. Manjushri, you'll see in the classical setup within a Dharma hall, the most classic setup where Shakyamuni Buddha is the central icon, is that Manjushri Bodhisattva will be on the Buddha's left and is the representation of wisdom and rides on the steed of this lion dog. And then on the Buddha's right will be Samantabhadra, and Samantabhadra rides on the steed of the great elephant that's described in the Lotus Sutra. And that's the imagery of the wisdom and dynamic activity, which are the two aspects of awakening, wisdom and compassion. On our altar, we have Shakyamuni Buddha in the middle, flanked by Ananda and Mahakashapa, his two close disciples and the beginning of the lineage. And then on the Buddha's left is Prajnaparamita, the mother of the Buddhas, that is in representation of wisdom, or is wisdom. And on the right-hand side, we don't yet have an icon, but we have the seed syllable for Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, the Bodhisattva of compassion. So this is also an ancient representation of the awakening of the Buddha. When we just have the shape of the Buddha, that's pretty good. But our minds go so quickly to a kind of monotheistic reduction to what the awakening of the Buddha is. And so having these different icons is important in general, but I think particularly important for us, because we will enter into that reduction just automatically. We don't have to do anything, it just happens. Yeah.
How I realized for so long I always tell people, like, oh, isn't it interesting that Manjushri doesn't have a spear or a sword in the Mad Dog? He hasn't conquered it. He's like intimately connected and at ease amidst its wildness. And I'm uncovering more and more that I have a shank in my right hand all the time to my spirit, to something that is quite untethered and irascible and totally unruly. Where how would you point us to discovering the ways we're doing that in subtle turnings with our irascible heart?
Yeah. Well, the most important thing is not to resist it. So oftentimes the Manjushri on the dog does have a sword, but in the monk's hall he doesn't. Right? He has the mudra, because the mudra is the sword. The mudra is the total clarity of awakening. It's the sword and it's the mirror, and he can ride his steed, and the dog for Manjushri, the lion, is not unruly. The lion and the Manjushri move together in total harmony. They're the same thing. So this is the medicine that we receive, the wisdom medicine that we receive through meditation. In the case of the Manjushri that's enshrined here in our hall, that we say that meditation is the way that we ingest and digest wisdom. Right? So that, and that's Manjushri, is the wisdom. And that wisdom allows for the total harmonizing of our heart and our being. So that's where we receive the medicine. It's also where we discover the way in which we are trying to use the sword to control this being, which won't work at all. We may be able to get something headed in a direction by poking over here, but we can't really fully harmonize. Yeah. And one last thing I would say is that meditation, again, the meditation is not something that just happens on the cushion. And so we really have to take the walls we've put around meditation off. Right? That doesn't mean we go around all the time, kind of like, no matter what we meet, we sort of meet it as if we're in Zazen. It means that what is true in Zazen is true throughout everything. And what is true throughout everything is also true in Zazen. That there is no starting and stopping. The ringing of the bell is just a convenience for us all to come together in one place. This is also the meaning of Sesshin. That if it's true that that Zazen permeates through everything and neither comes nor goes, we don't have to be stuck in meditation, right? But we also don't need to be stuck out of meditation. So Sesshin is the part where we express, well, what if we just stopped doing everything else and just sat meditation? That's Sesshin. Yeah. And then when we say, well, what if we just bugger off on meditation for a while and just go goof off for a couple weeks? That's winter break. But they're the same thing. And that's the heart that that can not ride the dog, but can receive the gift of the dog. That is not there to be controlled, but is offering us this life.